In ancient Rome, the gladiatorial games were not simply displays of violence and cruelty, but events of great social, cultural, and political importance. Among the most fascinating and memorable spectacles were the displays featuring exotic animals like tigers, lions, elephants, and other extraordinary creatures from distant and unknown lands, as they were brought into the arena to amaze and terrify the spectators. These spectacles not only demonstrated the power and vastness of the Roman Empire, but also served to entertain and consolidate popular support around the rulers. The staging of the primal struggle between man and beast exalted the soul of the citizen and underlined the values of strength and perseverance that the empire wished to emulate. When we think of arena fights, the Colosseum comes to mind. The magnificent, monumental symbol of Rome is actually just one of many arenas built across the major cities of the Roman Empire, where all sorts of events took place. Of course, Rome was the capital, and the Colosseum was the one that offered the greatest variety of games. A typical day at the Colosseum included a variety of spectacles. There would be animal hunts in the morning, death sentences prepared for execution at noon, and gladiatorial performances in the afternoon. When one thinks of the animals in the Colosseum, the first image that comes to mind is a lion roaring and prowling around the arena, hunting its prey or mauling the unfortunate soul who was on duty that day. But lions were not the only exotic animals captured, transported, and used in the Colosseum. Over the centuries, the Roman public was lucky to see a number and variety of animals coming from all over the empire. Egypt supplied crocodiles, rhinoceroses, hippopotamuses, and from the very south of Egypt, they even managed to bring giraffes. From the territories in North Africa, they brought gazelles, antelopes, jackals, ostriches, hyenas, North African lions, cheetahs. And from the Atlas Mountains in modern-day Morocco, they even brought bears. Exotic animal trafficking was a huge business in ancient Rome. The Colosseum's ever-increasing demand for exotic animals sustained specialized hunters living and working on the fringes of the empire. Numerous Roman authors, including Petronius, describe in detail the methods that these professionals used to track and capture dangerous animals like bears and tigers without harming them. Their prey were lured into pits, where they were left for days or weeks until sufficiently weakened, or captured with nets and tied to wooden boards. Not all exotic animals were slaughtered by the Romans, especially when they were brought into the capital for the first time in recent memory. Caesar's giraffe, described by Cassius Dio as having been exhibited to all, serves as one example. And the Romans definitely did transport animals by ship, and we can see this in a mosaic from an ancient villa that shows the transport of exotic animals. On the left side, you can actually see two stressed looking ostriches being led onto the ship, while on the right it shows the ship reaching its destination and the animals being taken down a ramp to meet their fate. This mosaic is known as the Big Game Hunt. There's also a mosaic depicting a tigress, and she actually has a harness on her body and is being threatened by a sword or knife of some sort. And given the nature of the leash on her, they transported tigers just as they did elephants and ostriches. The Romans hunted big cats in parts of North Africa and the Middle East almost to extinction. Some North African lion species even began to migrate south. This also happened with the North African elephant subspecies, which today is extinct. And at the end of the 2nd century BC, Asian lions also migrated further east to avoid being captured. And there's still a small population of Asian lions surviving in modern India, but they used to be spread all over the Middle East. Nearly all the tigers used in Roman Colosseums came from the regions of Asia Minor and even Persia and further north. They were virtually all a breed of tiger called the Caspian tiger, and parts of this area were well within the Roman Empire. The Caspian tiger was a mid-sized tiger, larger than a Bengal tiger, but smaller than a Siberian. And the population was declared extinct in 2003. Who knows what astonishment the tigers caused the Romans of the 1st century BC who saw them for the first time. The cost of catching, transporting, and maintaining animals from Africa or Asia was understandably much higher than that of animals from Italy or Europe. Most of the games in the Colosseum were sponsored by the emperor. He was the only one with the financial resources to organize these very expensive slaughters. For every animal that arrived in Rome, many more would have died in transit due to the lack of food and poor conditions. Temperatures in Rome were cooler than in Africa or in the Middle East, and not all animals survived the long journey before being slaughtered in the Colosseum. The hygiene and health conditions of the animals in Rome were also very poor, often crammed into small cages, far from sunlight and poorly fed. The capture of animals for the Roman gladiatorial games was a complex and organized operation. Once they arrived in the port city of Ostia, the animals were transported up the Tiber River to Rome, where they were placed in the vivaria, which were special structures to house and train the animals before the shows. From the vivaria, the animals were taken, usually the day before the show, to the Colosseum, where they were harnessed and dressed for the first presentation procession, and in this elaborate manner presented to the spectators before the start of the games. They were then taken back to the dungeon to await their moment in the arena to be sacrificed in front of thousands of screaming and cheering Roman citizens. Inside the Colosseum, animal fights came in two varieties: damnatio ad bestias, in which they devoured convicted criminals as a form of punishment, and venationes, in which they fought other animals or armed gladiators. The venationes were incredibly bloodthirsty, even by Roman standards. The first venatio is said to have taken place in 252 BC during the First Punic War. The event featured elephants which Roman forces captured on the island of Sicily, a novelty at the time. However much one might think that everyone in the ancient world rejoiced in these massacres, there was also a minority of people who prevented them. In 55 BC, Pompey organized a show with elephants, and the desperate cries of the elephants caused the crowd to sympathize for them and verbally attack the organizer, forcing him to stop the hunt. Cicero himself protested by saying, quote, "What pleasure can a cultured man derive from seeing a magnificent creature pierced by an agonizing spear?" End quote. What's more is that the Romans seem to have had little interest in breeding exotic animals at home. Animals caught in the wild were considered infinitely more dangerous, more valuable, and more fascinating. Often the treatment of the animals came down to the individual disposition. Not all of the Romans were cruel. There were enlightened emperors like Marcus Aurelius who had little interest in the Colosseum and the venatones. But his son Commodus, by contrast, was an avid gladiator who reportedly developed a crescent-shaped arrowhead which he used to decapitate ostriches, which he would then throw the decapitated heads of the ostriches into the crowd to shock and terrify them. Despite the cruelty and violence of the spectacles, The use of exotic animals in ancient Roman gladiatorial games left an indelible mark on history. These events were a demonstration of the greatness and power of the Roman Empire, able to amaze and entertain its people with extraordinary creatures from distant lands. Looking back today, we can see how these games reflected the complexity of Roman society, combining entertainment, politics, and cruelty in a grandiose display of the past. Thank you for watching. If you learned something new, please consider subscribing to History Leaks, leave a like and a comment. I personally reply to all of the comments myself, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.